Welcome to Wisdom from the Trenches. Today we have our awesome guest. Her name is Laura Poirier, the ADHD mama. Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show today.
So, can you tell us a little bit of who you are? I mean, your title does describe ADHD mama, which is awesome because I think we need to bring more awareness about ADHD and wear it proudly because it's part of us, right?
Absolutely, I agree. So I am Laura, and I call myself the ADHD mama. I have ADHD, and so does one of my two daughters. And I make videos online to try to educate people about ADHD. There is starting to become more understanding about what ADHD is, thank goodness, but I find there are missing pieces online. So when I started trying to find what I wanted online to watch videos, I couldn't find what I was looking for. So instead, I started to make it. About 3-4 years ago, I started the ADHD Mama, and we are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, a couple different places online. And so I help people from all over the world understand ADHD in themselves or their children.
That is fantastic. I mean, when I found you, I was just so thrilled because just like you said, you find everything so technically and so medical that it's kind of like, what? Like, you don't understand. How do I apply that? Like, isn't the
That is exactly.
And it's kind of like, I don't know how to apply it. And it doesn't talk about meltdowns. And especially most of the books are focused on kids. And like I told one of my teachers from my son when he used to go to school, listen, it doesn't disappear. You do not outgrow it. You grow with it. Also, they talk about adult ADHD, more male kind of like than female. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge need or awareness of their moms trying to keep the pace with other women who are neurotypical, and it's just exhausting. So why don't we start with breaking down what is ADHD?
ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. It's called that instead of ADD and ADHD now. It's just ADHD. And then there's 3 subtypes. What this is, I'll talk about the 3 subtypes in a second. It's a neurobiological condition. So what that means is it is in the brain. It is absolutely throughout the person. It's not like having diabetes where that is really one section of your life. Yes, it impacts everything, but it's related to one organ. ADHD is throughout the brain. It's throughout your entire life. Back in the 90s, they thought you would outgrow it. I was part of that group. I was diagnosed very young. And then the doctors were like, after 18, she'll be fine. So my parents were like, fantastic, you turned 18, no more meds. That didn't work out so well. So now I try to teach people that it goes straight into adulthood. Now, there's 3 subtypes of ADHD. You have the classic hyperactive, and this is probably what most people think of when you think of ADHD. You probably have met a little boy who was jumping around the classroom, talked out of turn, was a little bit considered obnoxious. They're not. What's going on in the brain is actually not obnoxious. It's very difficult for that person to handle. So don't judge them. The second type is combo, and the third type is inattentive. This is more of the dreamy person. They're distracted. There's no hyperactivity. There's not as much impulse control. It's more. Oh, were you saying something? and so you can have someone with the hyperactive and impulse, the distraction bit with the combo. I personally have the combo, so I have all of the symptoms of ADHD. And my daughter has a different version of ADHD. It is genetic, but it doesn't follow the exact pattern. So she has inattentive. She is not hyperactive. She's not terribly impulsive, but she is very distracted. What a sweet little girl she is. She's 7.
I have ADHD, and my 2 kids have ADHD. And can you imagine a household with 3 severe combo ADHDers? Yes. It's just fun. It always keeps you on your toes. Just when you think you got something else pops up. So it's not just kids, also adults can have ADHD. So how does it show differently in adults than in kids?
With adults, the hyperactive nature of ADHD often goes to the wayside. So you're not as hyper as an adult, but impulsivity and distraction are an issue. Now, most people think you can't pay attention on anything. No, ADHD means you pay attention to everything at the same time. You have no filter. So right now, there's a particular light just outside of your view with the camera that is shining slightly in my eye. It's annoying. And there's a really cool clock, but it has one of those tick, 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 tick. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but I sure can. So what I'm saying is at the same volume of attention as that light and that clock in my head. So I have to try to struggle through to even have a conversation at times because everything is trying to get my attention. So let's say squirrels. Squirrels are cute. They distract everyone. It is not just ADHDers that get distracted by squirrels. I'm sorry, I've seen more neurotypical people who do not have ADHD or neurodivergent tendencies get distracted by squirrels too. But if you get distracted by a squirrel, of course your attention goes to that because it's movement. It's interesting. So with adults, it's hard for anyone with ADHD when others around them don't understand. I have a tendency of telling literally everyone I have ADHD. And as stuff comes up, I will educate them. So if I get distracted, I'll say, I got distracted. That is a normal tendency for adults with ADHD. And then I'll keep going with my conversation so that they are on track. I do not put up with anyone that would disrespect me, call me out in public, because this is a disability that I have. And I don't put up with people being rude about it. And I don't run into people who are rude anymore. And if I do, I put them in their place, which is very hard for most ADHDers because they did not grow up having that confidence to know about their own ADHD, because it's quite confusing. Usually the parents don't know what's going on and they're struggling to find the answers. So hopefully by adulthood, they find that comfortable place with, okay, this is how I work.
Exactly. And now that you mentioned that, is very interesting because it is an invisible disability.
Yes,
and
you cannot see it.
You cannot see it, and you cannot tell. You cannot say, well, because you're blonde, because you're brunette, because, like, if somebody sees somebody with a wheelchair, they understand, and sometimes they might open the door, they might move out of the way. But when you have ADHD and they don't understand it, it is very hard, and it can affect your self-esteem. And it's hard because they don't believe you. They think it's just an excuse. Like
I have a story about that. So in the workplace right now, I'm being asked to do something that goes against my ADHD, and I have learning disabilities too. So I don't just have ADHD, I have 2 different learning disabilities. So I'm new at work, and they're asking me, oh, Laura, you're going to take notes in the meetings. You have to be joking, right? Like, no, I didn't say that in my head. I was thinking that. So currently, they still expect me to take notes in the meeting. Now, with my learning disability, my brain cannot listen and then transfer it to paper, pen. There's a disconnect. This is definitely not by choice, ever. And you're thinking, So I went to my boss with a solution, the big boss. And she's like, no, that costs money. Like, right. Because at that time, I was just trying to be like, here's a solution without saying, here's a solution because of my disability. So then I went to the other boss. There's 2 bosses. It's confusing. My other boss, and I explained, look, this is difficult for me because of my disability. And I didn't get into it at that time, but you should have seen his face. He just it's just notes. No, it is not just notes. If someone was in a wheelchair and they were told, oh, you're going to start filing, but the filing cabinet's 3 floors up and you got to climb up a ladder. Here you go. No, they wouldn't ask that because they know, they can see they're in a wheelchair. Okay, they can't do this. So this coming week, I need to have a conversation with them about, I'm sorry, That's not the part of my job description. I was hired on for a very specific job. I did not apply for a job that does admin work because I have a disability around specifically that task. It's not that I don't want to work. It's not that I can't work. But I am not going to be able to do this one task. And I did offer you with a realistic and affordable solution. Or you can ask someone else. Those are your only options. Now, there's a chance I'll get fired. There's absolutely a chance. I'm still on probation.
Yeah.
But I can't function in a meeting if I'm the one expected to take notes, because there is absolutely a disconnect in my brain, and I've never found a solution for this. But in order to work, I have found solutions for all of the other issues I've come up with, and I just don't apply for jobs that require administrative work because it's not who I am.
Exactly. And that's a big part of ADHD. And back into what you said, ADHD usually does not come alone. I have found that it always brings friends along.
Yes.
Name
Comorbid.
it. Exactly. Name it autism. Just because you have ADHD doesn't mean you have autism, but you can have both at the same time. Or you can have learning disabilities, anxiety, let alone ADHD is just by itself is anxiety provoking. Just for anybody who doesn't know, your anxiety just goes way high when they expect you to do something that you know it is not possible to do. So it always comes with something else. So we learn to tread along to make it as much as the best we can. And believe it or not, ADHD people are brilliant. There is a lot of ADHD people who are brilliant and creative, and we can hyperfocus. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about hyperfocus?
Hyperfocus. I could not control my hyperfocus as a youth, but as an adult, I can. Part of that was being a mother. So hyperfocus is when time stops existing. You are so focused. Everything is clear. All your ADHD symptoms are gone, and you are just on the ball. You will get a month worth of work done in a day. Like it is almost inhuman the way ADHDers can work when the hyperfocus is working. Now, there's downsides, and like people are like, oh my gosh, how do I get that person to work at my workplace? There's kickers. The ADHD person needs to be personally interested in the hyperfocus, and they need to allow themselves to fall in. And then you need to deal with the aftermath of a hyperfocus. And aftermath, I call it the hyperfocus hangover. It does not feel good to stop hyperfocusing. It does not feel good. Your brain is searching for dopamine, and it's been cut off because you're no longer hyperfocusing. Now, you can be distracted and the hyperfocus is gone, or you need to end it because, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to actually eat the food, you need to take care of your children as an adult who has children potentially. So I don't hyperfocus at home unless the kids are not home, because I will forget to feed them. It did not happen ever, because they would remind me they needed to eat, and then I would get grumpy because my hyperfocus was ended early. And then I didn't understand why I was getting grumpy, but it was me. It was my issue, not my kids' issue. Now, as an adult at workplaces, I will set my schedule around when I know I need to work on a project and I'm excited about that project. I will actually set a time for hyperfocus, and I'll set several timers to try to pull me out of the hyperfocus. I'll close my work door, I'll turn music on, food doesn't exist, I work on it, and it's so much fun. And then when I'm done, I take a blanket, I wrap myself up, and I eat sugar. Sugary based things. It could be a drink. It could be actual candy. I like gummies. It's something I know I like because you need to try to not crash too hard. And don't expect to do anything else that day. If you hyperfocus, So let's say you have a kid and they really like video games. Well, guess what? They are most likely full-on hyper-focusing. So if you say, shut that video game off, it's dinner time, and you don't give them warning, expect a blow-up. And it is not their fault. You need to work with how their brain works. So giving them the warning, but okay, you can't just yell across the room, hey, it's your 5-minute warning, and expect them to actually hear it and register it. There's a difference between the two, because people with ADHD can hear, but they're focusing so that it doesn't connect in with the brain. So often I have to go over and I will actually touch my person, ADHD, and be like, okay, look at me, eyes on my eyes. You're going to stop in 5 minutes. Okay, and I know this isn't going to feel good, but you can't yell at me, throw things, get angry, and you can't negotiate more time. We have to stop. Okay? Do you agree to this? And if they agree to it, you hold them accountable because they agreed, verbal contract. And if they end up having a hissy fit or a breakdown, I personally send my kid to her room because she often doesn't calm down without being alone. Now, sending your kid to their room every time they're having an issue will make them feel bad about having an issue. I've worked with my daughter. She needs the space. So explaining why. So she goes to her room. She will yell, scream. She doesn't break things anymore. That's really nice. But she'll have her meltdown and then she'll like, it's done. And she'll come out and be like, I'm better. Okay, it's dinner time. So you got to work around these eccentricities around hyperfocus.
And another point that you just touched is ADHD is we feel emotions 10 times higher than neurotypical. It's like, if we are excited, we are excited and we mean it and everybody's going to know it. But if we are sad, we're going to feel it and we're going to feel
everyone's
so
gonna know it.
bad. So that's another fun part of ADHD that you just touched, that the emotions are cranked to 1,000. So shouting can be a part of ADHD, and it's not that we are mean to you or we hate you or we are trying to disrupt or look ridiculous as an adult or as kids. It's just our emotions just take over. How do people cope with that? Like, you have an ADHD at home and you think they're being oversensitive or that they are exploding, or you just get upset so fast. And I said, you know what, we are just passionate about what we feel. But how would you explain it to someone who doesn't understand ADHD?
That is a very hard one to explain to people who don't understand ADHD, because they really don't grasp the level that we feel our emotions. My true happy would make the whole world happy. It would warm every heart in the entire world. That's what it feels like to me. It is that big. My joy is that overflowing. My sadness would kill everyone. Like, it is just so devastating. And my husband, his emotions are this. So the poor dude is like, I don't get it. You're intense, but he selects me. And he knew I had ADHD from our first date on, because I told him, of course I did. And I've been educating him along the way to try to understand with my daughters, making them feel okay with their emotions. It is okay that you feel joy beyond what anyone else can feel. And it is okay that you feel sadness that is so deep you think you'll never get out. This is who you are, and you need to accept who you are. And all emotions are there for a reason. Your fear is there to protect you. Your anger is there to try to right justifications that are wrong. Your happiness is there to bring you joy and others' joy. Like, they're all there for a reason. We just happen to feel them stronger. So I found that I really needed to teach myself and my children about emotions. So I found all kinds of stuff online, charts. Happiness lives up here, anger's down there, and sadness. And anyway, so I found it, and understanding it, respecting it, and not getting frustrated. Because often parents get frustrated, or adults get frustrated. that frustration is their own emotion. They blame the other person. Well, you made me feel that way. I can't make you feel anything. That is your choice. And often frustration comes from expectations. An expectation was broken. So as a new mom, as a young mom, I was very, very angry and frustrated with my children and myself. Everything made me angry. I lived in anger all the time. And I expected my kids to act older than they did. So when I finally started to research expectations and what age group acts which way, and understand my ADHD is going to act younger, and her hissy fits lasted hours, truly hours every day. She would have hissy fits because she was angry like me. So I had to learn about my own emotions first, and then I started helping her. And to this day, she's now 7. We moved during a pandemic halfway across the country from Nova Scotia to Ontario. We have started all new lives. Everything changed. And we had 2 slight meltdowns that lasted 10 minutes each over the past 4 months.
Wow, that is a huge improvement.
Huge.
It is huge. That is.
And do you know who had to change? Me. I changed my expectations. And when I changed those, I don't expect her to be perfect. I don't expect my daughter to not have hissy fits. And when she does, I realize, gosh, she's going through something really hard. Instead of, gosh, here she goes embarrassing me in public again. No. Get over that, Mama. Don't worry about your kids embarrassing you. You had kids. Guess what? They're going to. That's your own issue to get over. But when you get over it, oh, the other side is so beautiful. So much joy.
Yeah, and it's also our expectation that we grew up in a different time, that you are supposed to behave a certain way, and these are your expectations as women, as a mother. These are expectations as a child, and a child has to be quiet. They must be heard, not seen. So all that, breaking those barriers and understanding, educating yourself that this is caused by ADHD because it's part of how your brain works. So you set up different expectations. It's not that we are lowering our expectations as parents. We just set different expectations. I mean...
And making sure that your ADHD child, I mean, every children should, do they understand what you actually expect of them?
Yeah.
As an ADHDer, 99% of the time of my life, I had no idea what people expected of me. And I'm just kind of floating through life going, I don't know. And then people would get mad at me. I'm like, well, you were supposed to know this. I'm like, well, did you actually break it down? Did you tell me? I never had the confidence to say that. So now with my own daughters, I have made things very, very, very clear. So like the video games, if you're going to stop playing video games, you're not going to blow up at me. You're going to respect me. You're going to turn it off. You're going to come help set the table. Here's the expectation. Do you agree? So that they truly understand what's going to happen next. And with that comes a level of comfort and lack of anxiety when you understand the expectations happening around you. Yeah.
Well, also empowerment to say, oh, okay, I get it. Then this is what I need to do. Because yes, and I don't know how neurotypical brains may work, but my brain, my ADHD brain, will say, well, I want you to do this. I have no idea what they expect of me, and that makes me very anxious. And usually ask, what do you mean? How do you want it done? So I had to learn to advocate for myself and say, what does that look for you? Like, you want me, you want this clean, you want this done. Show me first how you want it done, and I'll do it. But that's part of ADHD, and I do it the same with my kids. This is how I expect it. and contracts are very important in our home, or natural consequences. This is going to happen if this other thing, because also other thing, the kids and adults have trouble understanding our consequences. Our brain doesn't slow down enough to understand that if I go over that bridge, most likely if it's closed, I'm going to fall. Our brain doesn't stop there. Our brain keeps going because what is beyond that bridge is shiny and it looks cool and I want it. And you just keep walking.
Impulse control.
Impulse control. So it is very important that we ask what expectations are, what are our goals, where are we going. That way everything goes, the anxiety goes down. We know what we are supposed to be doing. And I think that as parents is a whole ball game. Parenting with ADHD is not the same as regular parenting. It's just very interesting.
I have one and I have another, right? So you have both ADHDers. I have both. I have a neurotypical and an ADHDer, and it's really not that different, except for I understand the expectations of each child are different of what they are capable to do at that stage. I parent the same way with my neurotypical, and our relationship has really grown, and she is comfortable talking to me, and we work through things. And I've noticed that her relationships with other humans, this is the neurotypical, the older child, they're healthier. Her relationships with other kids are healthier because of this, I call it gentle parenting style of, I'm going to talk about the emotions. We're going to work through this. You're going to think about how other people think. There's consequences in life, and there's very little punishment. There's always, there's a negotiation because I can be wrong. And so it's the only difference is expectation of I understand what each child is capable at this time, and it will grow and develop as they grow up. That's the only difference.
Yeah, we did try. I wouldn't say I'm such a gentle mom because, I mean, there is a lot of Mexican in me. I do try to tell them, okay, these are natural consequences. If you leave this out and it doesn't go on the fridge, it's going to go bad. And practical things. You use your clothes, you put them in the laundry bin. You open the door, you close the door. So I think that is a very gentle as I can go. Being a very passionate Mexican mom.
No, I was raised with the guilt trip style of parenting that I always had to try to meet my parents' unrealistic expectations. Did not work with ADHD.
No.
So I'm choosing to do things in a different way than what I saw. There was definitely no yelling. No passion.
Sometimes it's hard to adapt two cultures. That has been a challenge. Adapt two cultures, and then you throw on top the ADHD. It's just awesome.
Yes.
Do you have any tips for any ADHD mom who now has been faced with a little bit more kind of like staying at home longer with the kids because things are closed down with the pandemic, which the pandemic I think has been a huge blow for ADHDers, especially if you're social. Like my kids are social butterflies, but parents that have kids with ADHD during the pandemic, and we don't have that extra help of swimming lessons and whatever other lessons they were taking outside the home. I think, as for me as a parent, I think sometimes it's getting a toll because I had to deal with my own ADHD and the sensory processing disorder and all that stuff. And at the same time, you have to handle theirs 24/7. So any tips for moms with ADHD that are trying to parent, or regular moms as well, who are trying to parent ADHD kids in a time where you pretty much are their number one caregiver? There is no more, they go to the swimming lessons, I get 10 seconds of less. So any suggestions, any tips?
Like this now.
Survival tips?
Change your expectations. Because what's making you miserable in this pandemic is your own expectation of, well, I'm losing this and I'm losing that and it's crap. And yeah, it's crap. It is. Trust me. It is crap, and it's going to be crap for a long time. I don't think everyone realizes how long pandemics last. I have a history degree. I've studied pandemics before. this is not going to last. It's going to last a couple of years. Like, this is our new reality for a while. Got to get used to it. So when you stop expecting life to look exactly like what it used to and just, all right, we're going to make something new together. And it's going to look different. And you're going to bump along the way. And it's not always going to be perfect. But have grace with yourself and grace with your children. That, okay, try something. We moved during a pandemic. Like, this was pretty crazy. Everything about our lives have changed. Everything. And we made do. We talked through it every night when we went to bed. The girls and I would talk individually about, okay, so how did today go? What was good? Well, what was bad? What would you like to do differently? And so the next day we would just do a little bit better. And so when we first arrived here, we actually homeschooled for the first several months. And I would have kept homeschooling because I love it and it was fantastic. But I got a job. I didn't mean to, but I got a job. It's not often that my specific trade comes up with this specific organization that I wanted to help out with. So I was like, fine, I'll work. And we had fun every day, but I didn't expect the day to go perfectly. I didn't expect it to always look the same. We just worked with what happened.
And I think that's great. That's one of the things that I have seen that it works at home with my kids. You have to pay attention what gets your kid excited, what gets your kid upset, because there are things that unconsciously we do that get them upset, and there are things that they don't think that get us upset, and just learning to recognize those emotions.
But also take the time to dig down and find out. Let's just take the upset. Notice when your kid's upset. You might think you know why, but you don't until you dig down, because it might surprise you what part makes them upset. And when you start digging down, they learn the skill of self-analyzing and then trying to find solutions. And then together you come up with a solution so that you don't make them upset, but you still need to, let's say, stop the video game to go do dinner or this or that. Like, you still need to function as family, but you can do so respectfully. It's really quite a fun process, and we found it worked on both girls so far. Neurotypical and ADHD are at a very, very young age. This is not something I started when they're teenagers. They're still like grade school, and fantastic finding out what's going on and finding systems. Okay, it didn't work. Next, let's try something different.
Exactly, and just keep trying. Like, for example, my family, we know that if we're going to do homeschool, the moment we turn on that TV before we do learning, it's just going to be catastrophe. It's not going to happen. I'm just setting myself up for failure. And
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So I don't know if you do it, but I have a little notebook, which is kind of like my black notebook, where I tend to write down what is working and what is not. There you go. Because I forget. I totally forget, and I will do the same mistake over and over again. And again, that's the memory part of the ADHD. We can remember. So
what you created is called an operations manual for your kids.
That's my kind of like secret plan that I have. Is like, okay, I know that if I do this, it will upset them. If they do this, they will upset me. So even if I have to put it on the board, please do not do this because it might trigger mommy.
Yeah, you have to respect yourself as a parent, that you have limitations and struggles yourself.
Yeah, but once you're starting to teach them that they are not the only one with limitations, they become more aware and they develop this respect. Oh, I'm not the only one having a hard time.
You're not alone. That's a big common theme I find with ADHDers, is they all think they're alone.
Exactly.
Well, I thought I was alone. I didn't know any other female ADHDers until I was 29 years old. I was diagnosed at 9. So 20 years of my life, I thought I was completely alone. And I knew my baby had ADHD because I don't remember what. There was something about her. She wasn't like her sister. And I'm driving the car with just her. And I was adopted, so I didn't have any ADHDers in my family. It wasn't genetic. It was, you're the different one. And I chanted to myself when I realized she was going to be like me, one of me, instead of one of us. And it's kind of a depressing thing, but to me, it was the most liberating thing to realize I'm not alone in the world. Oh no, I better get my ADHD under control, because I like no control at that point. I was a hot mess express. And yeah, so that was kind of like one of the many turning points of my ADHD journey, was chanting one of me, one of me to my baby.
Yeah, and that's important to get to that point. I mean, I wasn't diagnosed also until 31. And that was more because I needed the paper that said that there was actually something. And it's funny because they say soul in your head. Actually, as a matter of fact, it is. It is in my brain. That's exactly
Literally.
what it is. So it is in my head, but you need that paper to show, to be able to access services, because that's the nice thing about the system. No paper, no services, no access, and other fun stuff. So that was a little bit annoying. But it was kind of like, oh, that explains. Like, I mean, I knew I was weird. I knew I was weird, but it's not that I'm weird. Well, I am weird anyway. My brain is wired differently. It's not that I'm crazy. It's not that I'm silly. It's not that I'm dumb, because I'm certainly not. I know that I'm not dumb, even though I grew up listening that I was very dumb, in a most unpleasant word. I'm not useless. It's just my brain works differently, and it works in a different way that other people can do things that I can't, but I can do other things that they can't. So it is very reaffirming and empowering to know that you have that. So, because I know a lot of moms do whatever they need to avoid having their kids undiagnosed. And
yeah.
I don't understand that very well. I mean, I know that labeling kids is not very good. And I get why they will feel this kind of a stigma. But in my opinion, it's more like, once you know that you have something like diabetes or glaucoma, you treat it. So why not treat ADHD? I mean, it impacts every aspect of your life, and your kid is not any less because he has ADHD. But once you know that has ADHD, then you can shift the thinking of how you educate yourself and educate your child, and you become more patient and tolerant and know that they're not being defiant. Like, I mean, I think that part is very important. So, I think it is very important to have that diagnosis and that awareness of what's going on with your brain and your mind. And also, medication works for some people, which I think it has worked for you.
Yes, I have been medicated on almost every type of ADHD medication since being 9, and always had great success. Never had any issues.
So that's great, and that's kind of like breaking a myth. It works. For some people, medication works wonders. And it's so helpful, just like insulin it is to someone who's diabetic. It's a need. It's not that we like to drug our kids or we are ruining them, because medication, it is helpful. Now, on the other side, there is other people who cannot take medication. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, lots of reasons why you can't take medication. That's fair.
Hope is not lost. There are other things. There is coaching. There is therapy. Thank you so much, Laura, for being here with us. Hopefully another time we'll get the chance to hear you. You have a website, you have a Facebook, and you also work with Patreon, which you can subscribe and hear much more from Laura, because she talks about a lot of ADHD stuff that is very practical and very real life. So thank you so much. And sorry, keep you a little bit longer.
It's okay.
Nice to meet you, Laura.
It was nice meeting you too. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.